So the sole topic of the meeting today is the budget. And so Brent provided me 15 minutes ago a summary of this. So I took a brief look at this, Brent, and compared what you have for the FY23 budget to what I sent you, which is what Finance sent me as the FY23 budget, and the numbers don't really match. So I guess I want to try to understand that, and then also we'll want some background on this stuff at some point. But why don't you go ahead if you would?
Thank you. All right, well, thank you for the opportunity to show you the proposed 2024 budget. Appreciate the suggestions that were provided about ideas for making this an effective use of your time, and so I hope that we'll be able to do that. First off, to your question about the budget that Finance sent you, that's probably including amendments. For instance, if you look at the 2023 budget on the top left corner of the handout, it shows 167,706. We know that that was increased to 189,000, but the requested budget that was originally published, they may be showing you with the budget amendments. So I expect those numbers are going to be pretty close.
So is that to say that what Finance sent me is what was actually adopted as opposed to what was proposed?
No, this would be what was actually adopted, and what was actually, and what they would be showing you is amendments that were made to the budget over the course of the year.
So again, just to be sure I understand, the property tax budget that was actually approved was 167, and the 189 in what Finance sent me is what we actually received.
189 is what we actually received.
Okay.
And I don't know, Mr. Chairman, for sure if that 189 made it in before the budget was actually approved. This is what we inserted into the budget software for the city.
Okay. Then a procedural error on my part. We probably should approve the minutes of the last meeting before Brent launches. So I'd like a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Thank you. Motion passes. Brent.
All right.
Sorry.
So what I'd like to do is go over this summary sheet here, and then dig into about 4 areas of the budget with some more specifics in the dreaded spreadsheet. But don't worry, we'll zoom it in and you won't even know it's the dreaded spreadsheet. So first of all, in the first box, on the far left, you see the fiscal year 2023 budget, and that is what was actually budgeted. And all of the numbers in this top row will be what was actually budgeted, and you'll see there's some difference there between the actuals, of course. So the most significant, there is a significant increase in the property tax levy to be levied this year. And what the city can do, and something I told the commission I didn't believe that we would do, but we have done now, frankly for the good of the airport at this point in time, is make a significant increase in the airport levy. And the way the city's doing that is by shifting against the city's general levy towards the airport levy in order to increase this amount of money.
So this isn't an increase in the property taxes paid by hangar owners. It's just of the total amount of property taxes the city received, a larger portion is being allocated to the city. And is there a formula underlying that shows how they got to the percentage of total property tax revenue that's being allocated, or how did this number come about?
The number is being based on the level of need. The city council voted to create an aviation director position, of course, as you know, and they want a maintenance director. They've requested that we include that in the budget. I guess we knew that back in December even. And so with the addition of those 2 positions and some expenses that accompany that, outfitting them, vehicles, et cetera, this number, and you'll see an increase also in the sales tax allocation, are higher. And so I've grayed out the out years to prevent distraction by those, but as you look at the out years, what we're projecting here is that the city council is going to diminish that increase in the property tax that they've provided our way. That's a 200% increase at this point. And that growth will pick up. So you see a downward trend in that revenue item, 2025, 2026, though we're coming back up again. And that is, we're going down again. And then 2027 is kind of the bottom of that dip, and we start to go up again. And that's based on our projected growth in that property tax revenue that would come into the airport, based on growth of the airport, growth of the city, because that grows not only with the growth of the airport, of course, it grows with the growth of the city, which has steadily over the last 20 years hovered pretty tightly on a running average to 3.6% growth. That's what I see in our utility, our water pumped, and all the other indicators that we use to help inform that. So that's what you're seeing there. Is you're seeing we expect that the city council will continue to give us some additional support for a few years while our revenues catch up to the fact that they've added a couple positions. Sales tax, the city council said they want us out of there. We told them we thought we could probably do that in 5 years. So this shows a projection. They're giving us a little extra sales tax, $91,000 over the $54,000 from last year, so 70% increase in sales tax. And then that, we just show that diminishing by 20% every year until it's nothing in 2029. Miscellaneous revenue. So something to know about that line item is that tie downs have been revenued into miscellaneous revenue in the past. It's not really a miscellaneous revenue. It is a lease of land, even though it's not a hangar. So we've moved that revenue item to land rental, and we're going to take a specific, careful look at land rental together when we get through this sheet. So anyway, that's why you see a 94% decrease in that line item, because it's now just gate cards and other things that are truly miscellaneous revenue. Land rental, we'll go into a little detail on exactly how those predictions have been put together, and they're strongly based on what we developed together in December.
So, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but in the budget document that I sent you, we had two items that I think you're capturing here. One was land rental, and the other is building rental. And in the budget that I sent you, those total $319,000. And so I think you indicated earlier that's what we actually received. So why would that not be a good starting point for what we expect in the coming year, or even higher because we're raising the rents?
Now, this is based on probably a much better specific look at it based on what is the area, what are the rates. So I'd say this is a lot more fine-tuned than that. It's not estimate-like. And I don't know, to be clear, I don't know that what finance provided you is actuals. I was just saying that it probably includes budget amendments. Those are still not actuals. That's them modifying the approved budget document, the approved budgeted amount over the course of the year if they think there's going to be an increase in cost.
So do you have any idea of what the actual rental income is year to date?
Yes.
And what is that?
Do you want me to divert over to that?
Well,
we'll be looking at all that in specific in just a couple minutes.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, we can hold off on that.
All righty. So land rental, you'll see an increase in land rental. So this includes, we'll look at it in detail. It includes when stuff is coming online. And there was some concern because things are moving slower than we expected when we put this together in December, right, our funding plan. So we have delayed some of those dates. We actually have received from the Imagine Ventures a draft timeline that indicates to us that they think they'll be able to open their doors in, it's going to take them a little bit more than a year to build the whole thing, so they'll be opening their doors in May of 2025. And so that's been the basis for setting up the revenue there. We'll look at that in detail too.
So you had, in what you prepared last year, you should $112,000 in new rental income for FY24. And I'm not sure I've got a clear read on how much of that you expect to actually realize.
Less.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because we anticipated that Imagine's project would be rolling in 2024, and it's not going to be rolling till 2025. There is some possibility that they will want to lease the space sooner. What we have allowed for is that we wouldn't require leases to be entered until the conclusion, but if they desire to enter the lease sooner, and we're working through that in the negotiation process, then actually you would see some revenue sooner. But anticipating that that won't be the case, the worst case scenario is that we wait until they're done with the project to start.
So
showing
that's,
revenue.
when, in my understanding is that when the lease revenue will begin was a negotiable point. So we, I mean, I'm sure they don't want to pay it until they have to, but did we give that up in exchange for something?
It is harmonious with previous negotiations with other projects. So that's why, just to be fair to them, they seem to have some interest. But again, I want to give you the worst case scenario here. If it's better, great, right? If it's, we want to under promise and over deliver instead of the other way around. So.
Okay, and then of the 112, only 12 was for that parcel. The other 100 was from increases in tie-down fees, increases in rent. So you're going to cover that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, and then this first box is an overall summary. So we cross over from land rental now into the expense side. Operations only expenses. I know there was a lot of interest in it. The airport budget, of course, undulates significantly when we include and look at our federal projects. In fact, as we look at the actuals year to year for total budget expense versus total budget set, there's a almost sinusoidal undulation. So we excluding the federal grant side of things, operation only expenses predicted to be 984, and you'll see that there is that's an increase over last year, of course, mostly because of adding new personnel and equipping them.
Well, the budget document or one of the budget documents you provided shows that for the current year it was budgeted 532,000, and that's going to 984. So that's not a minor increase, and that's not just 2 new salaries. There's a whole lot of other stuff in there.
Yep.
So the detail on that would be useful.
Okay, well, I'm planning on providing that to you.
Okay.
But you're totally right, which is why I call it a significant increase, I didn't call it a minor increase, right? So, non-grant revenues are 901,000, so that includes that increase in the property tax levy. And I want to make again, remember that's something that's paid by the whole community. And it's one of the reasons why we project its growth over time at matching the city's general growth rate. It's not paid, it is paid by hangar owners, but it's paid by everyone in common, just based on taxable valuation multiplied by that levy rate. Back down to the delta between operation expenses and non-grant revenues, will still be negative 83,000. The grant match required is 102,000, so that puts us in 215,000. The fund balance, which I wish I had put on this sheet, the fund balance, I just checked with finance on that, and basically our current fund balance is
well, I had gotten a number from them also when I did my annual report, and there's what's current, and also, more importantly, what do you expect it to be at the end of the year? My pen ran out of ink.
So our current fund balance is $656,007. And that leads to a projection for a fund balance of $488,721 if we finish spending the 2023 budget entirely. The 2024 budget, and so when we go if you look at the fund balance projection at the bottom.
And if on that 488, are there any accruals against that will come out of that 488, or when we get the financial statements, the audited financial statements, you expect it to show an airport fund balance of 488?
Yeah, that's the projection of what it would be.
Okay, Thank you.
Yep. There is variety, of course, in the actual spend against the budget versus the budget, and of course we budget with some level of conservatism. Over the last 8 years, that spend is typically 92% of the budget. And so it could be a little better than that, but again, worst case scenario is And I actually reflect that in the out years for the fund balance projection, but I do not reflect it in the 2024 starting projection, because it's most conservative not to, but I also don't want to, it'll get way off the rails if we don't consider that in the out years. So, jumping down now to I'm not going to go over these line by line, but if you look at the top 10 revenues, Boise did something that Stan Seward suggested that we look at, which was they do a top 10 expenses and a top 10 revenues. We don't have 10 significant revenues, so we're just going to do the top revenues. But you can see that in the next two boxes, top revenues and top expenses. There's some similar overlapping data here, but this is gives you a little more detail on what those operation-only revenues are and things. That's all of our significant revenue is listed here. And then our significant expenses. And so one of them you'll notice, Mr. Chairman, to your question about the operation expenses being at 984, way higher than last year. Of course, that's true. You've got in your personnel expenses, you're going from a $158,000 budget in 2023 to a $407,000 budget. You're going from we have a requirement by the mayor to include in the budget $100,000 for beautifying the airport, especially around the terminal building. So that's a big marker too for increasing that budget. And then you have $110,000 for licensed vehicles to acquire a maintenance manager vehicle and a director of aviation vehicle. We don't usually buy new vehicles for the airport, but there's a convergence between the new and used price. It's becoming probably a poor value proposition to buy used vehicles right now because they cost a significant fraction of the cost of a new vehicle. And new vehicle costs, of course, are very increased from what they have been. We have been typically acquiring vehicles in the past several years for, a four-wheel drive pickup for $42,000 on a government contract or something like that. Pretty routinely, those prices are no longer available. We're looking at more like $70,000, $72,000 for a, something between a half-ton and a one-ton four-wheel drive pickup. And because these guys are driving in the infield and things, they really do need to have some utility capability. That would be your big pieces that are making up that difference from last year's operational budget to this year's operational budget. And then the construction capital maintenance, we'll take a specific look at that, but your grants this year, or our expenses associated with FAA projects, are $1,775,000 in 2024. In 2023, that total number for construction is $2,611,000. So we're actually we're almost $1 million less this year. And as you watch that number going in the out years, you see that undulation I mentioned. 2026 being a really big year. So we're going to jump over to the.
Well, last year you sent me, this appears to be a repeat of it, the Excel file with some 5,300 rows in it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be a little hard to follow in this setting. And so that's why I had sent you something like Finance Prepared that's got what you're describing, but down into one page.
Yeah.
So do you want us to look at this 5,000 rows here and walk through this? This is going to be very difficult.
I'm not going to walk you through 5,000 rows. I have some specific spots I'm going to show you. I do want you to see the detail I have to offer. And what you've got from finance is a simple one-year thing. If you want me to show you only that, it doesn't really explain to you what the picture is for the airport.
Well,
if you want to help us with this, you really need to see more of the detail I'd like to show you.
Well, I'd say two things. One is I found that somewhat useful. It's just trying to review it without having seen it before is the problem. Also, if we're doing a year-by-year comparison between, for example, the salaries for FY23 and FY24, I think this would be very helpful. And sort of if you start with the big picture and then you can dive into the detail. Okay, this one went up. Why? This one didn't change. I don't really need to look into that one. So like the building rental, I haven't, maybe that's in somewhere in these rows, but I don't quite get why we're not bouncing up more than we are, and apparently it's because some of these things that were budgeted to be realized in '24, just like the rental increases and the tie-down fees, we're just not gonna get that, but I don't know why.
Why don't you hang with me and see if you feel dissatisfied when we're
Okay,
done?
all right.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt you.
First of all, federal grants, this is basically just a straight regurgitation of the capital improvement plan that's enlisted with the State of Idaho Division of Aeronautics and the Federal Aviation Administration. For 2024, that would be an extension, a design of, excuse me, a design refresh on the extension of Taxiway Bravo, the east side apron construction, design only, and that's 1,350,000. Nope, design in 22. This is actual construction. And then the tower study, there's an environmental element that needs to be completed, and we're seeking BIL funding for that. We still have to match that funding, but it's above and beyond the airport improvement program budget. So, and then see the out years kind of lining out there. With 2026, we'll take a specific look at, because it's we are anticipating tower construction that year. We're trying to hug into this BIL funding. So if they'll sustain that, the big value there is, without the BIL funding, the city is responsible. We're responsible to come up with the money independently to build the tower, which we anticipate to be about a $5 million expense. And so if we can do that with BIL funding, we get both the benefit of having built it ourselves and being able to be part of the contract tower program and have it staffed perpetually by the Federal Aviation Administration. We are anticipating, if you look at the bottom line here, and one thing I want to point out to you is on the left side here, that is the 2023 budget, so you can always make a comparison in each account number to that. But on the left side here, you've got reimbursement for land purchases we've made in the past. So we're working right now on an application to get reimbursement for the purchase of property from Gail and Gerald Crownover. That's up at the runway protection zone on the far north end of the runway, or of the runway protection zone, I guess, beyond the runway, of course. And so we're anticipating a revenue of about $372,000. That will probably come to us yet in 2023, which is why it's not represented here as a revenue in 2024. So that'll beef up our fund balance a little further, if that comes to fruition. We don't know for sure that that's going to happen yet. We don't have a grant offer yet, but it's looking promising. So do you have any other things to say about that? Okay, Rob? Okay. All right, so next item. All right. So the land rental, this is an item of big interest. So you can see, again, the 2023 budget was $278,000 for land rental. So what's different here is, as I mentioned, tie downs have been added here. Now your tie downs, we increased the tie down rate to $75. There has been some discussion undulating about, is that too much? Do we lower it down to 60? And so I do have this set up so we can play with that if we have time at the end and fiddle with, if we adjust some rates, what happens? And what does that do to the bottom line?
So in this, do you have links to the underlying calculations, like 35 spaces times 75 versus, so when we get this, there'll be the links, okay?
Yeah, I have the links there. Yep, we'll be able to look at that. So first of all, interior council rate leases. So this is based on 196,000 square feet of is what is there, and it's at 32 cents a square foot, 32.5 cents. So it's just a straight calculation of that.
I didn't quite hear you. Sorry. Interior council.
Interior.
Okay, that's row 509.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's okay. Thanks for pointing that out. I'll try to do better. So no, we're on row 509, and so that's interior, and so between 509 and 510, does that cover all of the hangars?
No.
So if there's interior and perimeter, what would the other category be?
They're listed down here. I'll show them to you.
Okay.
Okay. The interior, you're aware of what the interior rate is, and so that's that calculation, just 0.325, the current adopted lease rate for interior. And then perimeter, hangars that have access at the perimeter of the field, street side access, are at 42 cents a foot right now, and there is 95,776 square feet of that. So that forms this 40,222. There's a few others we'll get to in a second. I'm just going to touch these in order. The market rate ag leases are composed of 58 acres and 21.52 acres at the new rate of $250 an acre a year, which is, we've checked around, and that is what we are told is an appropriate market rate for that ag land. And then there's one older lease that expires in 2025 at 46.43 acres that's still at $100 an acre a year. The difference is this: the 100 acre a year is paying their own water, so they're paying $86, I think now $90 per acre per year. So they're reimbursing us for the water, while the 250, that market rate includes irrigation assessment. So they're not quite as far off. That's like 190 versus 250. We talked to a really experienced real estate broker and to get our hands on what we understand to be good numbers for those rates. Then you've got your open land leases near runway protection zones. We recently changed that rate from $100 a square foot, which we came to learn was well below market, to $1,000, not a square foot, excuse me, $1,000 an acre per year, which is a better market rate for laydown land. Of course, they can't build on it. They could fence it probably. We really have to run anything we do there by the FAA to make sure that they're down with it. But so those uses are constrained, but that's a more reasonable rate. And then you'll remember that the city council, in their modification to the policy, airport fees and policies, required that when a leasehold changes ownership, it has to renew. It has to come in on a new lease. Can't sell the entity and retain an old legacy lease. And so that is in effect for this area as well. So we expect that in time, all these, I haven't projected it here. In time, though, that remaining 3 acres at $100 will change over to the $1,000 rate. Tie downs, we estimate, based on our discussions in December, an 80% utilization of the existing 25 tie downs. At $75 per each per month, you get $18,000 in revenue from that. If we reduce that price to 60, there is some argument to be made possibly that you would see some additional tenants. I think we've had that discussion before, but of course it's a little bit of guesswork in terms of where that optimum point is, where you would maximize your revenue by encouraging more use with a lower price. But there has been some concern from the user community about how high we raise that tie down rate for a monthly lease. Now, legacy lease base. So this is to answer your question, Chairman Kahn, about where is the money, where's the rest of the lease rate money coming in. So that's going to be covered in the next several items. The legacy lease base is what are we making from legacy leases today? And this is across the board, whether it's legacy leases aren't differentiating perimeter, of course, from interior. So it's not differentiated, it's a single base rate here.
And what does the term excuse me, what does the term uncovered mean in this context?
In the old days, there were leases. The city allowed people to enter into a lower rate lease for uncovered space, charged them a higher rate for space that was covered with a hangar, and a lower rate for space that was not. So if someone wanted to control an area around their hangar or adjacent to their hangar, they were allowed to lease it at a lower rate.
Okay.
Ultimately, the airport commission and staff both felt like it was leasing land here. It's not any different to us if you choose to build on it or not build on it. Furthermore, if someone leases at an uncovered rate and has that tied up, it may become then unavailable for construction of, And so that changed probably 10 years ago that we eliminated the uncovered rate. So that only exists in legacy leases. Now, as we move on from that base you see this perimeter access leases. So this is as these leases convert, and it's based on actual, it's based on the actual data for each individual lease.
So I had an earlier exchange going back several months with Lisa on the rent adjustment clauses in the lease. And there were at least 6, and they had to do with the timing of when they could be adjusted, and then also how the new rate would be developed. And so what you're saying, I think, is that somewhere in the system at the airport, all of those 6 factors are considered in projecting what the rent will be.
Correct.
So I also looked at the city's year-end audit, and it had estimated future, the GASB 87 required that that be in the audit as estimated future lease income. And the auditor didn't use what you just described. My understanding was because they believed it wasn't available. So help me understand the difference.
Sure. Yeah, if you, I hope you won't find this example crass, but if you want to really know about the lettuce, you ask the produce clerk. Right?
I missed that.
If you really want to know about the lettuce, you ask the produce clerk. Right? The auditors.
They didn't call you?
Right. The auditors, they've got to cover the entire, 90 or 9,000, 10,000 entries, 10,000 account numbers for the city in the audit. So they're going to have to be expedient in the way they do it, and they don't grind into the details like we have.
Okay.
So I'm confident that you've got a lot more accurate detail presented to you here. So what you've got, you did mention those growth rates. So the growth rate is considered, and that's based on an average growth rate. That is not individual lease based. That's based on the average growth rate multiplied by the area. So you got 3 things happening as you grow these year to year. One, you have when that lease is expiring, and then therefore is going to be required to come into a council rate lease. And so that's what this conversion stuff is. 2, you have the growth rate we are assuming a growth rate in the fees from year to year. And 3, you've got conversion growth rate and then the lease built-in growth rate while it's still a legacy lease. So those 3 things are at play in the projections. So you have your interior access legacy lease conversions. And so in 2024, that's 3,075, 1 or 2 leases converting over. 2025, that number goes up. So this ends up being cumulative, right? Because you're adding those, and I'm not representing those separately in the base. We're not moving that up to the base year to year. This is all cumulative within each of these line items. So as we follow this line across, how that conversion is coming over, and we really don't, we kind of get to the end on the legacy leases in 2039. So, 18, 19 years hence. But what we have not considered here, which will work in our favor and is, it's a factual observation, is that there's real estate turnover. So some of these legacy leases they're gonna change to council rate leases before we get to the end of the lease. We haven't considered that here. We're going to underpromise and overdeliver. So this is where we're showing you only conversions based on lease terminations or lease expiry. And then you got legacy uncovered rate. There's 156,000. So I have one thing to know. You say this may or may not convert. It is a reality, I think, that somebody who is going to now have to pay the council rate lease for that space that's uncovered may be like, I'm not really using that space. I don't want to lease it anymore. I'm just going to stick with my building. Or I'm going to stick with my building in a little aisle next to my building. So recognize that there is a risk that number diminishes. And after all my talk about conservative and under promise over deliver, I have not considered that. This is as if those just convert. The reality is it's difficult to separate that, and some people will probably still want to lease it and some people won't. So I have not attempted to break out or make some prediction about who will not want to lease at the new rate once their uncovered expires. Farmhouse RFP package. So we originally estimated Q2 of 2024, but we got there just this last week. We got their build timeline, and so that's been moved out to May of 2025. And what you'll see with that No revenue anticipated in 2024. In 2025, we've got a prorated revenue. May is just beyond the new fiscal year, of course, or excuse me, just beyond the midpoint of the fiscal year. And so basically we expect half of that revenue to occur. This is also a projection based on what we think is the available area for them to develop. There's going to be some variation or nuance to what they actually build on and actually end up leasing.
So they're not gonna pay it on the whole square footage of that parcel, only the portion they build on?
Anything that they want to control, they'll have to pay the lease on.
So the RFP, I think, laid out, I don't have it in front of me, but there was a diagram and the square footage was calculated within the parcel that was in the RFP.
Yeah.
So if I understand you correctly, they may or may not pay rent on that whole parcel size. There may be less.
What we're anticipating is they'll pay lease on all of it. So that's a great question, and it raises an important point. They're going to pay their entire lease annually, probably, unless they arrange to pay monthly instead. This is kind of what you would see if they paid monthly. If at the inception of their lease they paid the entire year amount, you'd still actually recognize the entire $13,000 in 2025. But if they chose to do monthly, then you would recognize only $6,447, and that's based on that RFP area.
Okay, so this is based on where we think we are on the rent with them. When do you think you'll actually have a signed agreement with these guys?
Probably 3 weeks. 2 to 3 weeks.
We'll have to raise a toast when you get that done.
By all means. Okay. Next, the Black Platinum project. So we anticipate that some of their inventory will come on to the rolls this year, and that it will probably take until 2025. We anticipate in 2025 they'll have all their hangars built, no pressure, and be leasing those. So that's what's the basis of that prediction, and then you've got just the growth rates increasing that from there. The northeast development parcel, originally we estimated late 2024. In reality, we think that's not going to happen until 2025, but that is a single hangar build, and so it's going to be binary, or it's going to go from nothing to everything in one go, because it's a single hangar. The northwest development parcel is a different story. The proposers on that, the proposer that has ranked first in council's adopted ranking of that project, they anticipate like a 5-year phasing. And so what you see here is an increase from 2025 to 2029, about a 20% increase per year in inventory coming on and coming into a lease. And
well, so my question on the rental space is the same. So the RFP again had a certain amount of square footage, which, let's say, both the northeast and northwest guys want to control and have available to them. And so if they have a multi-year build-out plan, does that mean they get to tie up the land and they are guaranteed to get it, but they don't have to pay anything for that right?
Yeah, except that comes with performance provisions in the development agreement. So if they failed in this phasing, they failed to meet phasing deadlines, then they could lose access to completing the project.
So
they would lose that hold on that land.
So if they didn't develop the last 50,000 square feet, I mean, they won't be paying for it, but if they don't actually do it, then the ultimate agreement we have with them will say, that's it, they don't get it anymore.
And that's pretty analogous to the way that subdivision development occurs. A subdivision, granted, they own the land, so I'm not trying to make a comparison there, but let's say that we developed a 100-acre parcel and we did 25-acre phases. Based on city code, we would have a certain amount of time in which to develop phase 2. We do our preliminary plat. We have to perform on phase 1 in a certain amount of time, or the project lapses, and we have to go back again to get a preliminary plat approved again. So if we're on track, we get that preliminary plat approved, then we build phase 1, and then we have a certain amount of time available before we have to perform on phase 2 or the project expires. And then we have a certain amount and that basically creates an extension, if you want to call it that, or prolongs the life of the project long enough for them to perform means complete that phase. So they've completed phase 2, Now they have only a certain amount of time before they have to complete phase 3 and so on. And if they don't, then the project expires. And so it's defensible to have a similar provision in this agreement, that if they don't perform in a certain amount of time, they'll lose that, and the airport would have the opportunity to go out to a new RFP to complete the project.
And an important part of what the airport's going to get out of these agreements is putting in the pavement. And so we have we sent both of these firms, Northeast, Northwest, a draft development agreement?
We have, although the agreement that we've derived with Imagine Ventures, we think has gotten to a much better place than that original agreement. It was based on an urban renewal proposal agreement, and there's a lot of differences. And so we've really refined through those differences with them. And so it makes a lot of sense. Our intent is, once we finalize this agreement, we'll send the final agreement that we're using with Imagine to these guys for their projects. There's going to be differences, but especially with this multi-phase project, it's going to have stuff about phasing. These others don't.
So in comparison to a subdivision, if they decided not to build out a subdivision over here, they could go somewhere else and build a subdivision. But at the airport, that's not true. We have a monopoly. So it seems like our terms could be a little more in our favor than a subdivision. And didn't occur to me that this is the way this would go. But in terms of what we might want in our favor would be, one, some rental on the whole thing, and maybe at a discount, and it could go up as they develop it. Or if we could get some assurance or some speed up on putting in the asphalt, which is what's going to be very, very expensive, and for which I think Toby's indicated we're not likely to get FAA grants. So are we at a point where we can't try to get some of those things, or have we already committed to not getting them?
When you say get some of those things, would you tell me what in
Well,
specific?
like paying rent on stuff that you've tied up but don't plan to do something with for 3 years.
That contract isn't set. I guess my concern with that would be, to your point about how expensive the asphalt is, we're trying to consider that. And for these guys, it's a matter of penciling out, right? It's a business decision. Is it going to pencil out for them? So there's a balance to be had there. They have to make money. We don't expect they have to make a killing, and I do believe you're correct. It's not a subdivision. There can be more advantageous provisions for the city, but at the end of the day, it just has to be balanced well. So when those negotiations go very well, everyone's transparent about it. We need to make this much money, and this is the expenses associated with building that asphalt, we estimate. This is the expenses associated with building the project. Here's our return on investment. Here's when this turns around, we start to make money. So,
well, I understand the asphalt would be expensive, and getting them to prepay that before they've got a revenue stream, I understand that would be problematic.
But that is what we are asking to do. We are asking to build that asphalt, right? They can't really you certainly can't lease a hangar until that asphalt's built. So they do have to think an investment before they start making any money back. That's really why we've talked about not this opportunity to not be charged lease until the project's done.
Are you saying that they're going to put in all the asphalt for the 3 or plus year development in year one? Or I thought it was over as they start building it out.
For the phase, right? They'd have to put in all the asphalt for the phase that they're working on.
I didn't quite get that. I apologize.
No problem. Sorry. They have to put in all the asphalt for the phase that they're working on. That's
Just
what they'd have to do.
for the phase they're working on.
Right.
Okay. So, and I understand that makes sense to me, because that's very expensive. But I don't want to presuppose that we know what their breaking point is on making money off this deal or not making money on it. I think if we told them they had to spend $500,000 on asphalt, we could say, okay, that's probably not going to work. But if we ask them to pay some or partial rent, I don't see where we know enough to say, oh, that's a loser for them. I mean, we haven't seen their pro formas, so how would we know that?
You're right, and it's probably, it's not impossible that they would say, hey, that's proprietary. We're not going to share our pro forma with you. They don't have to. We could, I guess, obligate them to in the contract, but all I can really say to that is duly noted. as we negotiate, especially this multi-phase one. The other ones, it's kind of irrelevant or less
Right.
relevant, I guess. But
Right.
as we negotiate that, we can sure talk about that with them.
So
The idea of paying lease, or maybe
it
maybe
is
like an open land lease on all of it until it's
it
built
is a
space.
negotiation, and so we're gonna want some stuff, and they're gonna want some stuff, and then there'll be everybody giving up some stuff, and we'll get a deal. So, I guess I wouldn't, I wouldn't give up stuff to start with, so if land rental wasn't in the initial draft that we sent them, do we have the opportunity to put that back in at this point?
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of changes, especially to this phased agreement, and so I think there's plenty of room for that to be negotiated.
And I may have this wrong, but I thought it was the northeast parcel that was being phased, not the northwest.
Rob's corrected me. Yes, you're
Okay.
correct.
Thank you. Okay, good.
I guess I need to go say never eat soggy waffles a few times. Okay, thank you. So that would be the northwest development parcel. I guess it's right here, thank heavens. Okay, on-field interim use. So we have just a couple of hangars. We have a hangar that the FAA's mentality about non-aeronautical use has stiffened over the years, which is probably good, right? Because the demand for aviation space has also increased. We have a hangar that is owned by a manufacturer who manufactures four-wheeler appurtenances. They're really cool. I ran into one of his pieces up on the top of Pinion Peak in the Sawtooth. They have an approved, what the FAA refers to with two different terms that are synonymous: interim use, non-aeronautical use. And so the FAA will specifically grant, where appropriate or where they deem appropriate, an interim use. They used to do that for a period of 5 years, and they have recently changed that to 3 years. So 3 years at a time. So this next line is that 11,520 square foot warehouse. It does have perimeter access, but it's charged at a much higher rate because it's market rate for warehouse. We base that on the market rates for warehouse in both Nampa and Caldwell, and tried to be considerate towards him because it was a big increase in his lease, but it's a defensible market rate of $1.20 a square foot per year. And so that's where that's coming from, and you see that being grown year to year based on increases that we anticipate in the council rate lease.
So my understanding of that concept is that there is an exemption or an FAA non-aeronautical use as long as there's not a need for hangars on the field. Is that correct?
Here's the way I understand it. It does have, they do have a, we'd have to ask Douglas what you call this kind of clause. They have a clause in their lease, and here's where you're correct. They have a clause in their lease that says that this has to give way for aeronautical use.
Mm-hmm.
The nuances to it are that he owns the hangar, right? It does not have a hangar door. It doesn't have access to a taxi lane. So there's a big capital investment. There's no header. There is a cutout for in that wall
Mm-hmm.
for a hangar door, but there's no header to support the hangar door, right? Something's got to be able to lift that door. So they're going to have to probably put in a pylon system or something to be able to put in a hangar door. But yeah, I mean, that's out there, and it's part of their lease document. So
how much longer is his lease now? Does he have 3 more years or what?
just signed a renewal, and he's got 3 years.
Okay, so he's got 3 more years. Okay, even though we're at the breaking point of no hangars for anybody.
Well, the thing to do there, I mean, no one has expressed interest in that hangar as far as the airport's been concerned.
Well, but I don't know that people understand what's going on with that hangar. So that, I mean, I'm not saying that there's not someone that's not out there that would say, I will put in a hangar door. I can get my aircraft in and out of there.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious how we handle something like that.
It's a little messy, but I think the way to handle it is, first of all, to let the airport know there's interest, and then second of all, start talking to John Boguslawski about, hey, I'm interested in buying your hangar. I know your non-aeronautical lease is going to come up at this time. I can put in a hangar door. I'm ready to go. He knows these things. We went through it in detail with him, and we actually compensated him at some point about 10 years ago for the fact that he was we reduced his lease term, and we compensated him for the damages associated with that, so that we could get his hangar into compliance with the aeronautical use provisions.
And is he paying $1.20 a square foot? So that's a lot higher.
Yeah.
So if we convert this to a hangar, would it,
Yes, it would come into the same rate structure as other
Right.
aeronautically used hangars.
But still, that's not an excuse to use something that is not. I mean, we're an airport, so that's important that we keep that in mind, that we need to stay an airport.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's why the FAA is so strict about it, right?
Right.
They take specific individual interest in each and every one of these. There's no interim use without a specific individual review by the FAA and approval.
this has been extremely good. We're about 10 minutes out from the end of the hour, so Randy, you've been very quiet. Do you have any questions? Timothy? Okay, I do appreciate this detail. But I'm gonna ask another question. Wash rack.
Yeah.
Have we had any success with these guys doing a wash rack?
Yeah, they have been pretty open to that. It seems that their intention is to include it in their project.
Which one?
The Imagine Ventures project, the farmhouse redeveloper.
Okay.
So that's good.
Yeah.
It's probably a good spot for it, right? It's still in the middle of the field, close to one of the fueling positions. What we've talked about with them, and hopefully not to spoil, anything that they have going on, I don't think they would object to us sharing that they have, there's an offset required from Silverhawk's fuel tanks to the building, just under the building code. If you have to be a certain distance away from a certain quantity of something explosive. And so, those tanks are all appropriate. They're double walled, they're monitored, they're all appropriate and everything. There's no, problem there. But based on that offset that the architect will find as he researches and complies with the building code, there may be some open space between their building and Silverhawk's fueling position that could become a spot for that wash rack. And they seem open to helping provide that wash rack. And while they're digging things up and putting in infrastructure is a great time, maybe even if they decided not to get a sewer line in there and regrade that to a drain and get a frost free in there,
So Imagine Ventures, you indicated they're gonna have a signed deal with us in 3 weeks or so. Does that include a wash rack
Right now they're including a wash rack.
in that, and it's in that plot of land that was in the RFP?
Yeah, and it needs to be characterized this way. This is how our discussions with them have gone. There are some things, it wasn't included in the RFP, so
No,
it's
it wasn't.
it's on the pretty please list.
Right.
But they seem like they're working hard to do the things that are on the pretty please list.
Okay.
So the
Good.
wash rack, 24-hour available bathroom, things that are kind of going away with the wash rack's not going away, but the bathroom's going away with the terminal building closing.
Very good. That's good.
So they would be taking care of the full cost for that then? We wouldn't be subsidizing anything?
At this point, that's what we're hearing from them, yeah.
Awesome.
And then in future revenue, is there anything in here for those canal lots?
No. This is devoid of a projection for revenue there.
Okay, so
That would be an
FY
add.
'24 may be optimistic, but FY '25 should be okay. I mean,
Yeah. One thing we did point out to Imagine Ventures was the idea of, hey, across from them, if there's a need for more parking, that's probably a good spot for parking. Silverhawk has interest in being able to build parking there. We've talked about RFPs, and we have some rough draft material put together for that, but
Well, so Rob indicated that there was a certain amount of due diligence required before he could provide an RFP.
right.
Is that done and we're ready to write the RFP, or when do you think an RFP would be available for review and issue?
I don't know the answer to that one. Rob may have some thought on that, but it's still a little bit of a weird one, right? Looking for what puts the worm on the hook for somebody building something there, except somebody who has an immediate interest, like Silverhawk or like these guys might, as far as parking lot goes. Now, if we were going to try to get some other use and we just put it out there and said, hey, what use do you want? And no one wants it, but Silverhawk wants to be able to build parking and these guys want to be able to build parking, that could be a self-resolving issue.
So Rob made some good points in that the city has certain requirements, like how you do a parking lot, what you have to do with planters and all that kind of stuff. And then also, I think it was discussed previously that there's some number, eight or so possible uses for that. So if we put in the RFP these are the things you gotta do, and these are the things you can build there, then we see, and we say, we may or may not accept whatever you propose, we can kind of get the process rolling and see what happens. And I think Rob had also indicated if we're only gonna do this with half the lots to get going, so that seems like it would be good to move that along.
Yeah, it is good to move it along. No contention there. I think what we're just up against, it's just a limiting factor is staff availability, manpower to do that. So that's one of the reasons why some of the stuff goes slower than we would have hoped.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Okay, I think that, Mr. Chairman, I think that this is what I was most anxious to show the commission was the derivation of these items. The legacy stuff is just based on, like we talked about, those 3 items. And then we talked about the 1/5 thing, so I think we're good there. I do have a report to share with the commission that, just briefly, that you may know already, but looking for my highlights for those other areas I wanted to show you. So we've already looked at that. And if you want more detail on the capital improvement plan, I'll just give an opinion that that's probably a reasonable item to consider not to consider as in a decision making, but you as the commission need to be up to speed on what our capital improvement plan includes. So it might be a good item to just go over the capital improvement plan sometime together, maybe at a soon future meeting. There are a list of things that are not airport improvement project or federally funded projects, and that is gate controller security project. Right now, we manually program those gate controllers. They're quite old. They get run over sometimes, which maybe that's irrelevant, but our intent is that those need to be upgraded at some point so they can all be programmed at once. So you, Lisa or Rob or the director would be able to deploy a code to let UPS in so they can bring a part shipment into Vivian's hangar, without having to call Vivian and say, can you come and let me in the gate? It just expands the capabilities and it improves security. With doing that, those will all be connected to a fiber optic ring, and we would be able to also have surveillance at every gate, which we're anxious for that because when there have been theft issues or problems on the airfield, being able to say, hey, we know who came in and who went out, and we have enough resolution on the camera to characterize this person or this vehicle. We would like to do that for the security of the airport. And so you see those numbers a little further out. We cut that out of the 2024 proposal because they're with bringing on new staff and buying them new vehicles and landscaping around the terminal. There's, as you pointed out, Chairman, there's a lot of increased costs. So we wanted to delay that a year just to prevent having so many high costs. And then there are a couple of other things. Vehicle replacements, we usually have those on a 10-year cycle. We propose the maintenance persons would be an 11-year cycle because while we have to buy both of those in 2024, we want to offset that replacement in the end of that 10 years. And we often keep them longer than that, but that's the...
And do we have any funds allocated to replace the courtesy car?
Actually, I forgot to do that, so I'm glad you mentioned it.
It can be used.
We'll put an item in there to propose that.
Or we're not retiring another airport vehicle. We're just getting 2 new ones, so we couldn't recycle one of the existing ones.
Right, yeah, and the courtesy car probably makes more sense if we could get our hands on a reasonable sedan instead of our on-field, more all-terrain type cars and stuff, or trucks, I guess. So with that, Mr. Chairman, if there are other questions, I do have one announcement I would like to share with the commission.
Well, let me just, I do have so is this in a form that you feel comfortable emailing out to us?
Yeah, I would be happy to do that. I do need to tell you, I meant to cover this. There are administrative expenses. Every fund in the airport has to pay their share of the audit costs, their share of city attorney costs. Obviously, we get our fair share of use of Douglas and his time for assisting us with lease issues and things like that. And there's a number of other administrative fees that each fund has to pay a proportionate share of. Those are not yet updated, so they're still shown at 2023 levels. If you could just
put that in a note with this.
Yeah, so there'll be some nuanced changes to the budget because of that.
And then I wanted to confirm the date and time of the budget hearing?
So we know the date. We don't know exactly what time we'll be up. We can
And-
look at the order in which they're proposed that we present.
And the date?
I know we shared that last time. I don't know that off the top.
Okay, I had sent something to you to confirm that.
It's like July 13th, I want to say.
Okay,
So, Public Works will be, we'll get a 2-hour time slot of that.
okay.
Good chance that they'll defer us to the later half of that. So if you wanted, so you'd probably be safe showing up at 6 o'clock.
Okay, then, this increase in the property tax revenue that's very, very good. And so the council, if I understand it correctly, is wants a lot of these improvements made at the airport and is willing to move money from some other group to us. And I really, really like that. That seems to be a change in thinking from 18 months ago, and I think that's very, very positive.
Yeah, I think that, I will tell you my impression. My impression is that they are saying, hey, we're adding manpower, we're gonna give the airport a bolus. And as we've depicted here, I think we're gonna see them reduce that back down again. But if they'll give us time,
Right.
then we'll be okay with that happening.
Okay, I'm sorry, you had an announcement.
My announcement is just, I wanted to tell everyone that I am actually leaving the city of Caldwell. I will be here until we get the budget done. I've promised to stay until we have that done. We have the Public Works Director position posted. If the new director gets in here, and we've got, Ashley left us, but we have Ashley Newbury has just been hired as one of the, hopefully 2, Public Works deputies. So there's a number of restructuring things that I think will be able to cause to happen with me departing that'll be really positive. But I've loved working for the city. I love working with the airport. I do love the airport, and I hope you won't rat me out if I come and show up at the airport once in a while. But I think we have a fabulous airport, and I think wonderful things are going to happen there. We have a lot to be proud of at the airport.
I'm sorry to see you go. Do you have your next posting in mind?
Yes, I have a consulting company on the side, which gets very little of my attention because this job demands a lot of attention. And I have done that because a guy who is fortunate enough to have as many kids as I do has a pretty high burn rate. And so I'm going to take my consulting business full time, which I'm excited about for a couple reasons. One, I really want to be able to provide better service to my customers there. They wait a long time for me to turn projects around for them because of how little time I can give to that. And I also have an interest in doing some product development and probably starting a few other businesses. So you're either going to see me kicking banana peels in the gutter or hitting the big times. I don't know which. So
I'm sure it'll be successful. I wish you all the luck in the world with that. That's exciting. Good for you. Any other questions, comments, input from anybody? Okay. Is next month our dark month? I should know that off the top of my head. Yeah, that's what I thought. So, okay. Take a motion to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed?